All right, all yours, Chair Bly.
Well, thank you, guys. It's been quite a while since I've been on here. Nice to see everybody's smiling face. I want to thank Mosa for handling the last meeting. And hopefully he was able to time manage better than I'm able to time manage, because I do my best, but it does seem to run long. We all have stuff to say. What can I say? But anyways, thank you very much for doing that. And let's just start with quick introductions. I'm John Bly. I am head of the Engineering Contractors Association. I've been on this committee for, I don't know, 13 years, something like that. And I'll hand it off to Jake.
Yeah, Jake McKenzie represents Sonoma County Transportation and Land Use Coalition, and I've been on the committee. It's not even been 13 months. So anyway.
And Ross Clendenin.
Yeah, Ross Clendenin, SCTA, RCPA.
Thank you. And Drew?
Drew Nichols, SCTA, RCPA.
Rick, there's a veteran for you. Rick?
Rick Lutman from Rohnert Park, and I represent the Sonoma chapter of the League of Women Voters.
Thank you. Shauna?
Shauna Gauze, SCTA.
Tom Banning?
Hi, Tom Banning, 3rd District.
Okay. Kathleen?
3 or
sorry.
4 years.
Oh, I'm sorry. Didn't mean to cut you off, Tom. Kathleen?
Hi, Kathleen Cortez. I'm with Sonoma County Area Agency on Aging.
Okay, thank you. Adam?
Adam Garcia.
Sorry about that. Adam Garcia with SCTA, RCPA.
Okay, and Jerry from King City?
I'm Jerry Glazer. I'm with the North Bay Electric Auto Association and only been here 4 meetings because we didn't know we had a seat.
There we go. You got one. Thank you for showing up and participating. And Steve, an old friend.
Travels with a hammer.
Yeah, with a hammer.
From now on, yeah.
Steve Bertelbaugh with the Sierra Club, and I've been here for too long to remember.
Many years. Natalie.
Hi, Natalie Higley, representing the North Bay Labor Council, and I want to say I'm coming close to a year now.
Awesome. Thank you. And Brian.
Brian Ling, representing the 4th District. My first meeting was, I think, our first Zoom meeting said it will only going to be on Zoom 2 or 3 months, and that was 2 or 3 years ago. So someday we'll see. We'll meet in person again.
We will, I'm sure. And Chris. Barney.
Yep, Chris Barney, SCTA. Good afternoon, everyone.
Dana.
Dana Trey, SCTA.
Thank you. Mosa, thank you again for running the last meeting in my absence. Appreciate you.
It is my pleasure, be assured, we'll take care of you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Musa Abbasi representing the Santa Rosa Metro Chamber.
And Dennis, Ann's iPad.
Okay, you can see I get to play with my wife's iPad today, and I'm Dennis Harder, representing Sonoma County Alliance. And I've been proudly doing that longer than anybody else on the screen.
It's either you or Steve have the record, I'm thinking, huh?
I got them both. Got them both.
Okay. Jeff from SOS, Blakesley.
Yeah, Jeff Blakesley. I represent SOS Roads in Sonoma County here. I think it's been maybe 1.5 years, 2 years. I was away for quite a few months with another personal obligation, but I'm back.
Welcome back. Tom, good to see you again.
Hi, Tom Conlon down here in Pothole City, actually just north of the city limits of Sonoma. I've been on the council for about 7 years or so, representing the Sonoma County Conservation Council.
Excellent. David?
Afternoon, everyone. David Roberta, SCTA staff.
And Orlando.
Hi, this is Orlando with Caltrans District 4.
Okay. And Rob?
Hi, I'm Rob Sprinkle, City Santa Rosa, just listening in today. Thanks.
Well, thank you for all of you guys participating. Drew or Ross, are we supposed to be doing something to vote to continue via Zoom? I see that on the agenda.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
maybe
so
that came
for-
up last meeting or something, so go ahead. I'll turn it
Right.
over.
So yeah, this is usually the SCTA RCPA Board of Directors will approve a resolution for 30 days to allow remote meetings. And since we did not have a board meeting in January, each individual advisory committee has to find that the conditions exist to hold the meeting online. It's just for this meeting. The next board meeting is on February 6th, so we wouldn't have this item again in February because the board will have taken care of it by then. So it's just, as of today, right now, the committee finds that the conditions exist to hold this meeting online.
Do you need a motion, second, discussion, and a vote?
Just a motion and a second and a vote of consensus, or however the committee would like to vote.
So moved.
Move second.
Motion and a second. I don't know if we need any discussion, but if there is any discussion, jump in there. Jerry's got his hand raised.
Yeah, it's just a fast question. We're not covered by the Brown Act, are we?
We are.
And so in March, we won't be able to do via Zoom anymore. Is that correct?
So item 4C, we'll touch base on that. We're working on something that we will present to the committee in February, but Ross will have a bit more information to add under item 4C on the Brown Act and specifically with March.
Great question.
Yeah.
Seeing no other hands raised, we'll call for the question. You can either thumbs up it if you're in favor of holding this meeting via Zoom, and thumbs up if you're in favor. Vote now.
I see unanimous consent.
Okay, let's just double check. Are there any disapprovals of holding this meeting via Zoom? Seeing none, the motion carries. Any abstentions? Seeing none, the motion carries, and we are on for the Zoom meeting. Thank you. I believe we are to public comment. So Rob, Orlando, or anybody else have any public comment?
Not for me, thanks.
Okay.
No comments from me.
Administrative items, we go right into approval of the November 20, good God, that was a long time ago. Meeting minutes. I passed the baton to Mosa, but I think if somebody wants to make a motion to accept the minutes, I was not
Also
here, so I'm
move,
going to have to
Mr.
abstain.
Chair.
Yeah.
You have a second?
There's a second. Any discussion?
Then you'll take it over.
I will call for the question and we'll go in reverse order. I have to abstain. Any other abstentions? All those in favor, signal aye or raise your hand. Anybody in opposition to the minutes as written and produced? Sorry. One of my three screens is ringing. Did we just finish the vote?
I didn't see, I only saw abstentions from Chair Bly and no no's. Was
Okay.
that correct?
Thank you. Minutes are accepted as written. Informational, Drew or Ross?
Yeah, so
Meeting schedule?
for item 4B, the 2023 SCTA RCPA meeting schedule was included with the agenda packet. This has all the dates for the SCTA RCPA Board of Directors and all of the advisory committees that we have for the calendar year of 2023. So you can put them in your calendars now.
Thank you. Any comments from the committee on any of that? And if not, we'll go on to the Brown Act information.
Thank you, Chair. Just a brief update. Thanks for bringing that up, Jerry. Definitely on the forefront. So the CAC is indeed a Brown Act committee, and the big upcoming change to the Brown Act is basically the requirements are being loosened to allow fully, the loosened requirements are coming to an end. with Governor Newsom's announcement that COVID-19 state of emergency will end on February 28th. The next CAC meeting is on February 27th, so that will still be virtual. However, we are preparing to move back to in-person meetings. So as a result, virtual meeting attendance by committee members will be allowed only if just cause, emergency circumstance, or teleconference requirements are met. And all of these circumstances require that members communicate with SCTA staff in advance of the meeting. So we will be in communication with some more detailed info on that. We're just getting it solidified with legal department. But we will have that out to you well in advance of the March meeting, which will be the first in-person meeting for CAC.
Excellent. Any guidelines? Well, I see Tom's got his hand raised. I'll let him go first. Go ahead, Tom.
Just wondering if lack of viable public transportation constitutes a criteria for emergency attendance.
So my understanding so far is basically for emergency or just cause, those are kind of one-off. So that will, there's essentially that can only be used for 20% of meetings during the year. However, the older teleconference requirements should allow that. It's just going to require communication with SCTA staff well in advance. But I don't want to be quoted on anything quite yet until we get our full details back from legal. But there will be possibilities. But for the most part, we are encouraging members to attend physically.
Thanks, Ross.
Thank you. Jake?
Yeah, physical attendance will be at your King Street office. Is that right?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Okay, and you will come up with kind of your guidelines after consult with legal and so forth at the February meeting or before?
We should have those well before. We're just getting final approval on that, and then we will be sending them out.
Okay.
I'm planning to send them out independent of an agenda. Just send them out to all members as soon as we get them.
Okay, thank you.
And then if you have any questions on this, please feel free to reach out to either Ross or myself, and we'd be more than happy to help. It's going to be fun to see everyone back in person in March.
Yeah. All right, on to financial statements.
Mr. Chair, I think we have item 5A first before that.
The Measure M annual report items.
Sorry about that. Measure M draft, Measure M annual report. Yes.
I'm going to start sharing my screen in a moment here and bring up the presentation. Tell me I have the wrong screen, and I will. Slideshow.
Ooh, you got it.
Oh, I got it. Yeah.
Got it. Ding, ding, ding.
Okay, that over there. Okay, so the Measure M annual report is being presented to you today for a recommendation of approval to the board. The report was developed in partnership with the Technical Advisory Committee and is recommended for approval. I'd like to take you through some of the highlights of the document that is included by link in your agenda packet. After today's presentation, the document will be put before the board for approval and then bound and printed and sent out via US Post to the directors and anyone else who would like hard copy. We are pleased to draw your attention to our updated logo, which is allowing staff to help transition stakeholders and residents from Measure M to Go Sonoma. As a quick refresher, Measure M was enacted in 2005 and will expire in 2025. It is a 1/4 cent sales tax for transportation. Measure M is expected to exceed $32 million annually in 2023. The economy has had some fairly significant highs and lows over the life of the measure. On this graph, you can see that actual annual revenues dropped quite a bit under our original projections for a number of years after the Great Recession, but we are now exceeding forecast revenues for as they did briefly pre-pandemic. Looking at cumulative revenue, or sometimes referred to as total revenue to date, Measure M is still less than forecast in 2004. The market is downwards, but overall, we are currently forecast to close out the measure at about 98% of the original 2004 estimate, which is not bad given what we went through. As many of you are aware, there are 6 primary categories in Measure M: project categories and apportionment categories. Apportionment category includes local streets rehabilitation for 20% and local bus transit for 10%. And project-specific programs category includes 101 at 40%, local streets projects for 20%, bicycle and pedestrian projects at 4%, and rail at 5%. Finally, administration of the entire measure is limited to 1%. Apportionment programs disperse funds directly to jurisdictions based on a 50% population, 50% road mile formula for the local streets rehabilitation, and on the current Transit Development Act, also known as TDA formula for local bus transit, but that does exclude Golden Gate Transit. Here you can see some photos that were submitted by the jurisdictions depicting how Measure M LSR funds were spent. We have the roundabout at Southwest Boulevard in Roanoke Park, some slurry seals in Santa Rosa and Cotati, road patching in unincorporated Sonoma County, and some street painting in Healdsburg and Petaluma. Those are just examples. There was a lot of money spent, but these are just some highlights. Local bus transit funding goes toward operations and is a key source for ongoing service because of the stable and predictable nature of Measure M. The Bicycle and Pedestrian Projects Program includes funding for specific projects and ongoing programs, and included here are images of the Bike Safety and Education Program, including Bike to Work and Safe Routes to School. Highway 101 is another project-specific program in Measure M. This year is particularly notable because the final HOV lanes in the county were opened to traffic, completing continuous HOV lanes from the county line to the Windsor. You see here in the upper left hand, the groundbreaking ceremony for the first HOV lanes through Santa Rosa in 2001, and although those were not included in Measure M, and the final ribbon cutting ceremony for the HOV lanes in Petaluma in 2022. The last project was able to make major advancements early in the pandemic when traffic levels dropped due to the stay-at-home order. But the ability to complete the continuous HOV lanes from the county line to Windsor wouldn't have been possible without Measure M. I would like to draw your attention to both our illustrious leader and Mr. McKenzie in both photos.
Yes, I was about to mention that, so thank you for bringing it up.
Happy to.
You can tell that I've not aged a day.
A day.
The Local Streets Projects Program, also known as LSP, funded advancement of 3 projects this year: design and right-of-way for the 116-121 intersection improvements, construction phase 1A of the Airport Avenue improvements, and design of the Hearn Avenue interchange improvements. Hearn Avenue interchange project is funded with Measure M and city funds through the design and right-of-way phases and has submitted 100% design plans to Caltrans for approval. The project has a final plan for construction funding and is being presented as a separate item on next Monday's board agenda, and you will also hear about it later today. The rail program did not have any appropriations for fiscal year 21-22. SMART did finish paying off an interprogram loan last year. So what's next? This is Mr. Harder's favorite question. Measure M will end revenue collection on March 31st, 2025, and Go Sonoma will begin on April 1st, the same year. In the next 11 months, SCTA staff will develop a Go Sonoma strategic plan for the board's approval that will go through TAC and CAC first. Additionally, this body and then the board will also be considering amendments to the current Measure M strategic plan to account for projects that haven't progressed as originally anticipated. Finally, the SCTA funding program cycle 1, also being addressed on today's agenda and by the board on Monday, programs the first 2 years of Go Sonoma revenues for 25-26 and 26-27. With that, I will hand it back over to the chair.
What a nice report, Shauna. Thank you. I love all those pictures of those luminary guests too. Steve has a comment. Go ahead, Steve, or a question.
Yes, in looking at the tax receipts for this year and next, my impression is that they are up partly because of inflation. And I'm curious if we ever map our income and outgo as in, let's say, $2004 or some consistent dollars to compensate for inflation.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. We track both the inflationary growth factor and the actual growth factor. And we also compare it to the 2004 dollars that were originally projected. So yeah, we track everything.
Good, thank you.
So which did we see in these slides?
Which would be basic numbers, right? You asking?
That was a little, I don't know if everybody else heard that. That was a little buzzy for me.
So I believe the slides are showing the total growth factor that includes both the inflationary growth and the real growth. So it's just the combined number.
Are you okay with that response? Is that right? Ask that question.
John, I think your audio is having issues. You might want to try reconnecting.
I feel like it's a Star Wars-esque type voice.
Better.
I have a question. It's probably pretty simple. On the executive summary at the very end, there's a reference to projects that did not progress, and there may be some funds reallocated. So my question is, do we get a list of that? And is that anything this committee will even be involved in?
Yes, sir, and yes, sir. It's another item on the agenda later today.
My audio is messed up. I'm gonna hand it over to Melissa for a moment. If we can handle the meeting, and then I'm going to reconnect.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair. Musa, do you mind stepping up while John reconnects, logs off and reconnects?
I'll take over.
Thank you.
I just wanted to thank Shauna. Thank you and Ross for putting that, and David probably for putting that that paragraph in at the end of the executive summary, as we requested last meeting.
Any
I
other
just want to say,
comments or questions?
I just want to comment that what a great job. I think it's a great summary of all the transactions and of Measure M, and people want to know where the money's gone and what we've done. It's just an incredible document, and thanks to the staff and the professional job that you guys did.
I see who else wants to comment or to ask questions?
That would be Jake.
Jake, please.
Yeah, it's amazing to reflect back at the genesis of Measure M and the in-depth discussions we had on SCTA back in the day, and I think this is a great pictorial representation of the projects, and certainly as far as getting SMART started and the 101 widening project, you know, it got done.
Thank you, Jake. Any other? I don't see.
So am I back on? Can you hear me again?
Okay, John, I'll give you over there.
Thank you. Thank you for covering. Little gremlins in my computer, obviously.
So before we move off this item, Mr. Chair, we are looking for a recommendation from the committee.
Motion to accept.
I see some hands raised.
I heard a motion. Got a second?
I need a motion.
Who seconded? I'll second. All those in favor of accepting the Measure M annual report, signify by an aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposition? Well done. Well done, you guys, as usual. Thank you.
I did have one more comment.
Yes.
I wanted to draw attention on page 18. There's a very brief paragraph from the county of Sonoma on how it spent its local road funds, local road rehabilitation funds. And I find that amount of information from that particular jurisdiction to be completely inadequate. And I know that staff has been trying to get more information from the county, but I want this body to be kind of aware that there's not, you know, the jurisdictions are not submitting comparable reports. And I don't know what we want to do about that, but it seems like we should at least talk about it at this committee at some point.
I was going to ask before we get off of that, Tom, is there a specific recommendation you'd have where their reporting is not consistent with what you'd like to see?
Yeah, well, yes. And Shauna sent to me the form that she sends to all the jurisdictions equally, and they respond as to the best of their abilities. But it appears that one jurisdiction does not seem to respect our process of reporting. And I don't understand why, and I'd love to have them come and explain themselves to this body. That would be my request.
Thank you. Shauna, is there a point person over there that you can connect with? And
there is, Mr. Chair, and I did reach out to the Deputy Director, Janice Thompson, and she did provide some information back to us, but I can see why it is very difficult to parse. It was thousands and thousands and thousands of records, and it's not clear because what happens is all of the money that they get from Measure M and some other sources goes into one pot that funds maintenance personnel salaries. And so where that money gets spent, they track it, and they have all roads. It's very difficult to parse out to be able to say, we spent Measure M on this road, this road, this road, and this road, which I understand. And not all the jurisdictions do that, but I do think there is room for the county to be able to say a little bit more about, rather than just say, we used it on patching and paving, to say, the county was able to patch and pave X many miles of roadway within Sonoma County in the last year. Measure M contributed this many dollars toward that effort. Something like that is slightly more than what we're getting from them. So I have worked with them. I have put them on notice that the Citizens Advisory Committee is looking for more detail, and that we will expect something more from them next year.
do you need to, no offense to your ability to arm twist, but do we need to elevate this to a supervisor or Suzanne Smith contacting Janice directly and saying this just isn't going to fly? Or How do we get resolution on this, Shauna?
I'd be happy to make a motion, Mr. Chair.
Can you wait until we go through Jerry and Jeff? I think they both have something to say first.
Sorry. Sure.
That's all right.
Absolutely.
Shauna, did you have something that you wanted to say?
I was just going to suggest that if the committee wanted to have make a motion or have some sort of a coherent message, that I would carry that to Suzanne, who would then transfer it to Janice and Johannes.
Jake, hold that thought if you would. Jerry, you had a comment or a question?
Yeah, and first an apology. The network went down. Actually, 3 networks went down and I got disconnected. So when I missed,
I had the same thing.
Half of your presentation, and which I'm sorry about. One question was, can I get a copy of the deck? Because what I saw in the summary portion there would be great for me to report back to the members of NBAA. And I used that as the vehicle. I had a question in the report because something looked strange to me. I saw the numbers of the money Measure M funds, which went to 2 of the bus transportation districts. And then reporting from there was the number of rides that were given. And I came up with a number when I multiplied it out and divided it out that said, hey, for one, it was $3.50 per passenger ride of the funds that we sent in. And the other one was like $1.10 per passenger ride. But then I noticed that the funds for Measure M only accounted to about 10% of the costs that they have for running a transit district. And that would make it $35 per ride and something like $12 per ride. Am I reading these wrong?
I'm not sure exactly which math you're doing, so I might need a few more words on that, or maybe you could send me an email offline and I'd be happy to parse it out for you.
Yeah, it had to do with Sonoma County Transit and then also Santa Rosa City Bus and Petaluma Transit as well. In all cases, it was the report of Measure M funds that went in, and I'll give you the page number on page 20 of the report.
And if you've got it right handy, Jerry, it might be better to do it on the chat segment so we can keep moving, and then
that's fine. That's fine.
Would that work
I
for
just
you?
didn't understand that, and I thought maybe I'm misinterpreting it. Because in general, even when we get to budget and the financial reports, somebody has to give me training.
Okay, thank you, Jeff.
Yeah, we met with Janice, well, over the internet, met with Janice and Johannes last week, and I asked a similar question. I had the draft report in my hand, and I asked, we'd like to help you make sure that these funds go to the right place. And we weren't able to get an itemized answer. We were able to only get the fact that all the funds received in this way would go to road maintenance within the bulk funds that they already have there. We were promised that we would get an update on which of the projects slated for last year were actually completed and which ones had to be deferred, if any, and what projects will be slated for this year. But there's never been any mention that they could accurately break out exactly where the Measure M funds went. I just don't think I don't think they're tracking it in that way.
Sounds consistent with the other 2 sets of comments that we've got. So, yeah. Jake, you're going to have an all-encompassing motion to handle all of this, right?
Well, we've been out of practice at this, but I would move that the Citizens Advisory Committee request that the Measure M report accurately reflect expenditures of Measure M monies by the County of Sonoma. And I'm certainly very open to any additions to that language.
Do we, let me second that so we can get into discussion. So second, do we need to expand that for transit to cover some of Jerry's issues, or should we hold off until Jerry and Shauna have a chance to go off to the side over here?
Are other jurisdictions accurate reporting, or is this an undue burden?
I mean, I did try to address this before. I have tried to address this in the past, but it is something that comes up over and over again. The jurisdictions are not, because we are so flexible with our funding, we try very hard to make sure that these monies are able to work for each of the jurisdictions in the way that they need to. So it can run the gamut between they spent it on a specific project, they banked it for a future project, or they spent it on road maintenance that are, that went into painting, street markings and or fixing sidewalks or patching or paving, spot paving. So it can, or it could, as I said, it could go into a larger project, which was a paving of large sections of roadway. So it is very dynamic what we get back from each jurisdiction. So it's hard to pare down what it is we want to require of them. But I do feel that Citizens Advisory Committee has asked over and over again for additional information, particularly from the county. So I think that in regard to the local streets rehabilitation program, the county could, with enough notice, try to find a better way to report where that money is headed.
The request was made. Thank you for that, Shauna. The request was made. Can we see the language of the motion over on chat? I don't know if that's from you, Shauna, or if that's somebody else can put that over there on chat. The motion from Jake McKenzie.
Drew, did you get that?
Not all of it. So Jake, if you don't mind repeating it, so then I can type it. My hands don't run that quickly. My apologies.
Usually with motions, we go back and listen to it and we can pause and get all the wording right.
I'm certainly not capable of typing it quickly on chat. So the Citizens Advisory Committee requests that the Measure M report accurately reflect expenditures of Measure M monies by the county of Sonoma. I believe that was the language that I used.
Want that to apply to all of the programs, Jake, or just the LSR program?
Well, I was hoping that there'd be an accurate report of monies that the county received, whether it was spent on road maintenance or others.
To be fair, we do get much more detail on the other programs. It's just the LSR that appears to fall short of what the Citizens Advisory Committee would like to see.
It's a suggestion, Jake, since that's a pretty focused request of them. Should we start with that request and see if they ERP all over themselves?
Fair enough.
And if they can comply with that, maybe next month we can expand it however we need to.
I want to pipe in on that too when you get around to it, as far as what the wording is like.
Mr. Chair, I was reflecting that is the SCTA not going to be being asked to approve the Measure M report at their next meeting?
They will be asked, yes.
So we're making a request that at the end of the process, and I would hope that before SCTA would sign off on the Measure M report, if they have a request from their CAC, that they would not approve that until such time as our request had been adhered to.
Do we want to reconsider a no to not accept the report until such response has been.
That
gets a little sticky, doesn't it?
That's maybe would be considered a wee bit aggressive, Mr. Chair. That's I would, lean towards your thoughts on the matter. I would say reflect LSR expenditures of Measure M money by the county. I'd amend my motion to use that more specific language.
I would second that amendment. I like that. That's more specific and that's good. Appreciate it. We got several.
My case.
Well done to come up with that twice in a row. That's above and beyond. We got 4 comments, Tom. I'll start with you.
I support Mr. McKenzie's politique ask, and I also invite, as I stated before, if there is nuance and detail, perhaps we could hear from them at this committee at a future date how to resolve this problem. Do they need a new software system that actually does kick that out like the other cities use? Do they need some other process? But I just think our responsibilities on this body, we need to step up and address this. So I'm glad we're doing that today. Thank you.
Excellent. Jerry?
Yeah, just a couple of thoughts on this. One was that Jake put this through the word consistency in the reporting came to mind. One previous career, I worked on making electric buses and trucks, and California Air Resources Board always gives money for all of these things, but it comes with a page that says, and by the way, here's what you're reporting, and this is how you were reported to us. And so the onus ends up on those who receive the funds and reporting back in a consistent framework to support the exposure of how the funds are used and how they're successful or not successful. And in the end, the use of the report isn't for the board. I mean, the use of the report is for the citizens who are throwing in their 0.25% tax. And so it has to be in a legible form where they say, hey, that was worthwhile because I got this and that much was spent for this, or too much was spent for this.
Shauna, do you think that the directions we give them when we send out the forms that SCTA sends out are clear enough? Seems like other jurisdictions are able to handle the reporting accurately and clearly. And it's just these guys. So Jerry, I'm not sure if it's something that we're lacking on in our request for a structured response, or if it's them.
Let's clarify this. I don't know either. I mean, I'm wondering when we give out the funds, is there something that says, and here's the comes along with it?
I suspect since Shauna's not having a trouble with the other jurisdictions, that it falls in the lap of our county and their bad software programs. But Shauna?
Yeah, I would say that it's an accounting issue right now. That it's not that the county is being particularly obstreperous or uncooperative. I think that they would like to comply with it. They just, based on the accounting that they do, they don't have that data, particularly when looking backward. So I think what would best serve this body is if the Citizens Advisory Committee were to request that the county make an effort next year to provide additional detail from what they have provided in the past.
Thank you. Let's get through all the comments, perhaps before we go back and revisit the motion. Jake, we might want to include that. Make an effort next year and let this year go by the wayside. But let's listen to the other comments. Thank you, Shauna. Steve?
Yes, I don't think we should imply that what they reported was inaccurate. I think the problem is that it doesn't have sufficient detail. And I can imagine that when you're combining what we've contributed to what they've done with what they've put in from other sources, it would be very onerous to produce very much detail. In other words, trying to say our money went to this project, that project, and the other project, when in fact it got into the pot, and it's very hard to tell which project it actually did go to. And I think Shauna's suggestion that that they simply report how many miles of roadway we were able to maintain of the total that was maintained last year would be a good illustration. But I think this requires a conversation with them and meeting of the minds about what we want to see in there. That's my suggestion.
Thank you, Steve. Rick?
Thank you, John. So I'm concerned about the matter we were discussing a few minutes ago about the timing here. If we just pass this motion as it stands, the best we could hope for is to say, well, maybe next year you'll do better. But I'm thinking that if this Citizens Advisory Committee really is to have a meaningful role in looking over Measure M before it goes to the SCTA board, we ought to tell them, to tell the board that we are unhappy with this and suggest that they hold off approving it until we get an adequate amount of money from the county, information from the county of Sonoma.
I definitely appreciate your sentiment, Rick, but what I'm hearing is it may be a software accounting program, and we may be asking for something that's too obtuse for them to be able to comply with, and it may actually do more harm than good. I'm just trying to paraphrase into a smaller box what I'm hearing from Shauna. Is that a fair statement, Shauna? If we get too aggressive with them and say no, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't, but we may be doing more harm to the situation by doing that, right?
And Mr. Chair, if I may, I think the situation we have with this fiscal year annual report is, as Shauna mentioned earlier, what the county does is with their roads fund, they deposit multiple funding sources into the same fund. And so they cannot track what core money that went into that fund was used for a specific project. Now, I think in the future, we can press upon them the need to track those expenditures separately by having them in separate accounts. But I don't think there's any way for us to be able to reconcile what funds they use for what projects for last fiscal year. At this point, they don't have the data. They won't be able to come up with the data. And it's really, if I had a savings account and I had 3 different paychecks go in, I don't know what paycheck I used to pay what bill, essentially, is what we're at right now.
Yeah, so I think, Rick, that kind of goes to, we're kind of in between a rock and a hard spot for this year. I don't think any of us like it, but if they don't have the ability to do it, they don't have the ability to do it right now, and we don't have the ability to unravel their books. But anyways, I defer Jake.
Well,
Jeff, I'm sorry. Jeff Blakesley was next.
Yeah, I'm all for accountability, but what's more important to me is that their maintenance effort is maintained. I don't want to see that $2.7 million go in and then $2.7 million come out of the general fund. So I think it's what Steve said and what Shauna said is exactly right. They put this money into one fund. It's road maintenance fund. It goes in along with their $10 or $15 million of general funds and any other funds they get from bonus funds for that year. And then it's spent on road maintenance. So what you'd be asking them to do is keep another set of books for this money. And I like I said, I like accountability, but I'm a little worried here that we're asking them to do something that isn't really going to tell us much except what specific road happened with that fund. What I'm concerned about is how much roads happen with all the funds, and did the funds get reduced because these went in? And this would never tell us that. This would never help us know their maintenance of effort on existing funds. All it would tell us is where the $2.7 million we sent them this year was spent, right? So I don't like to ask for things just to ask for things. I like it to have a purpose.
Great discussion, great point. Jake?
Well, I'm afraid I'm now getting a wee bit confused here as the maker of the motion. There's $2.7 million of Measure M funds is allocated to the county for in the road maintenance pie. Is that correct?
If you're looking at it, I'm going to say yes. I don't have the.
No, I'm not looking at it. I'm just reflecting what other committee members have said.
Right. I don't have it in front of me. Let me pull it up.
I was just looking at the one sent out last week, the report sent out last week, and it has $2.715 million going to them.
Yes.
Okay, and our concern as a Citizens Advisory Committee would be that these monies that go to the county are in fact spent on maintenance of county roads and do not go off into the pension fund or the wastewater treatment plant operation in Sonoma. I mean, is that not our concern?
Yes.
Yeah, but money's money, and what's most important is they don't short their own funds by 2.7. I mean, they could give you that report. They could tell you what roads they did, what was built and everything, and then they could just short their own funds by $3 million on the other end. We wouldn't know that by getting the report about where that money was spent.
We do actually require them to report out on maintenance of effort, and that will be an item that comes before you in probably February or March. So you'll hear that report out as well. The county always maintains its.
Okay, having heard that, Mr. Chair, can we have language or can we ask for language in the Measure M report that reflects what Shauna has just been telling us and what Jeff is concerned about?
I think may I try to summarize what I've heard?
Yes. Are you saying, Jake, you're not thinking that your motion does that? If you add, make a better effort to divvy up the boxes.
Well, the motion said to accurately reflect, the road repair, whatever that acronym was, the road repair expenditures by the county. And that's what I would want to have as an accurate reflection of these Measure M monies.
Thank you. Shauna, did you want to try to morph this slightly?
Well, I think that we're talking about two different things now. And the original complaint, as I understand it, is that there is very little detail about how the Measure M monies were spent. Not that they were spent, because they were. And we also have the maintenance of effort report that comes later on in the year that will tell us whether or not they maintained their effort and didn't short the general fund and so forth. So I think that is a separate issue. I think what we're looking for is more detail on how the monies were spent. At least that's where the original concern was. And so I think that putting the county on notice that the Citizens Advisory Committee requests additional detail on their LSR expenditures is what the spirit of the motion was meant.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, additional information on how the monies were spent to be reflected in the Measure M report.
Perfect.
Yes, but I still like your request for accuracy too, because not that I don't trust them, but I think if you leave it too friendly, we might get taken advantage of. So I like that little tweak, Shauna, but I also like Jake's expectation of this Citizens Advisory Committee that what they're reporting on is very accurate as to their expenditures.
And from a process point of view, Mr. Chair, it would seem appropriate, if possible, for you as the chair of our committee to be present at the SCTA meeting where this subject is discussed and bring this matter in front of SCTA as a recommendation of it's their committee after all.
I agree. Denny?
Yeah, again, we're in year 18 of this measure. The measure says that we're going to give them 20% of the revenue. And it goes to the repair and maintenance of the streets. And two is that they have to maintain their level of maintenance prior to that. So back to Jeff's point. And whenever you say, accurate, I think they're probably reporting accurately that this is the money that we gave them, and they put it all into one pot and they spent it all in addition to X number of dollars. They can tell you what they did for the whole year for the county, but it includes these plus everybody else's monies. And so that's really what we wanted to do whenever this measure is passed, back to Jeff's point and everything else, is that you wanted a maintenance of effort, and that these were additional funds to do additional pothole repairs. And so I think that's what we're doing. Going forward as this measure, I think that we could ask for additional detail for next year and everything else. But, my gosh, this is already, end of January, and we're talking about, hey, we want you to go back and do it differently last year than we have the other 17 years. It's pretty nuts. So that's my comment.
I would almost propose that that Shauna, you, if possible, we set up a meeting with Janice and have one other member join me at that meeting with you and ask some of these questions. Do we have time to table this until February, or does this have to go through tonight?
Table it as long as you like. We have the fiscal year ends in June. The annual reporting, it starts again in September. So we are, again, as Mr. Harder reflected, we are talking about stuff that has already it's already pretty well in the past for this annual report, which reflects expenditures from 21-22. It's sense.
Denny, I'll go back to you. I know there's two other hands raised. Would you be willing
John,
to?
I'm not
You think that's the right avenue?
Yeah. What exactly are you trying to get from them that you're not getting? That why this report would have, why you have an issue of accepting this report as prepared and as presented. I mean, it's actually reflecting the dollars that they spent it, and we have the level of maintenance report that they can provide. So you're just looking for additional detail, but it's not going to change this report.
You're talking about our Measure M annual report. It's not going to change. Correct. Yeah. Well, I'm looking for this county to be in step with the other jurisdictions that are receiving Measure M money, responding to the form that we sent out, requesting for the backup information. And what I'm hearing is, of all the jurisdictions, they're the only ones that aren't doing that. So maybe I heard wrong, and maybe there's a good reason for it, but that's what I would be talking to Janice about it as deputy director at TPW. Say, why can't you do what everybody else can do?
That's what the maker of the motion heard as well, Mr. Chair.
Jerry?
Yeah, I've been listening, and the part for me, and maybe I was a bit confused on all of this. The funds are given out with the intention that they be used for specific things. And, in this case, it's road repair and other pieces. If those receiving it track things in different buckets, don't allow them to say, yes, we spent it on that. At the very least, they have to have those buckets in their accounting system. What I'd be looking for, and it was very close to what allowed me to ask the question about the transit districts. Hey, we gave these funds for this type of activity. And report to us at the end of the year that you spent these funds, how much of this activity you finished in total, and what percentage of the budget for those activities does this represent? And in the case of the transit districts, that's what they did. 9.95% of their operating costs were covered by the money that we were given to Sonoma County Transit. That seems transit authority. In any case, that seems like the reasonable way to go. And the other thing I would point out is this. Yeah, we shouldn't be talking about this year. We looked at the report this year and it doesn't satisfy all of that. So let's make sure we have it for next year. And so the motion should be talking about future reports, not this year's report.
Thank you. Rick?
I like the idea, John, that you suggested, I think, a few minutes ago, that you and Shauna and perhaps one other member of this committee, such as maybe Jake, actually have a sit-down meeting with Janice. I think that wouldn't foreclose us passing this motion, but I think it would be useful as a supplement to it. The motion by itself is just words on a paper and may not clarify to the county what we are concerned with. I think a face-to-face conversation would help there.
I like your idea there, Rick. Thank you. Do we still have hands up or those old hands? Sounds like we're ready for at least the decision on the motion that's in front of us. So I'm not sure that Denny, that you're happy with the motion as we're talking about it, but you might be if it was bolstered by a conversation with Janice and their bookkeeping or accounting firm. And that's what I'm suggesting. And I don't think we need to add that to the motion, Jake. I think the motion stands alone. And then I'd ask Shauna to arrange a meeting with one other person joining me and you, and we'll have a chat with them and say, hey, this is what concerns us. We realize we can't do much about it this year, but everybody else seems to be able to toe the line and come back. We're a citizens advisory committee. We get this information back and it says, you guys are acting differently. We don't understand why, nor do we think it's appropriate that you should. And let's hear what they have to say and bring that information back to this committee in February. Shauna, does that make some sense?
Is that the motion?
Happy to set up a meeting.
What I was saying, Jeff, is I didn't want to tag that on as a motion. Jake's is long enough as is. It's a motion and it's a separate action that I'm requesting. We would act or ask for a separate meeting after this motion is voted on and either accepted or not accepted. But I want to get through the reading of this motion and see if this committee likes that as a statement of our discontent. And then I'd follow it up with a request for action for Shauna to set up a meeting and have a discussion with Janice on that. Is that confusing, convoluted, Jeff? Sorry. There's a lot going on here, a lot of moving parts.
I just don't think we know exactly what we want from them yet. I think we should have, I think the motion
before we vote.
I'm sorry, what?
Can we read the motion before we vote, please?
Oh, of course. That's where I was going. I was ready to do that. So Drew or Shauna, has somebody got that in front of them?
So the motion, this is what I've heard from the words. I put it in the chat. Was future reports to be included in the motion? If so, please let me know what I have missed. I feel like I have missed some words in the language of the motion on the table from Jake McKenzie.
I don't think you need to add future to that, the way I read it. I think the future part of it can come from a subsequent discussion with their staff. That's my opinion.
I think we need to read the motion because I don't understand the motion at all. Because we aren't going to change. I thought it was understood that we aren't going to change this report. That we're looking for why they're not, complying with additional detail, And we're asking for in the future to go ahead and provide additional detail. And so I'm not sure if that's actually a motion or if that's just, the next action that you're going to take as the chair of the CAC. And so Jake, either you're going to, I guess, reword your state your motion so we can all understand what it is if we're going to vote on it.
Well, it puts me in somewhat of an awkward position, this past conversation, because very clearly when I made the motion, I was intending that we request that the report in front of SCTA be amended to include more accurate information. I'm going to have to amend the motion or withdraw the motion I made and amend it. I'm sorry to get so parliamentarian here, but
that's okay.
I had thought that the sense at the beginning was that we wanted to see a change in the report that was in front of us this afternoon, and that the chair would be authorized by a separate action to go in front of SCTA. We now have a situation where, if I'm reading the room right, Mr. Chair, we have a number of people who are uncomfortable with that first idea, that it be more a recommendation for the future, and that there be a meeting of the chair and others with the county prior to the SCTA meeting to have a discussion as to how future reports might be amended.
Yeah, I think the confusion is whether we're going to accept this report this year and ask them to do better in the future.
I'll withdraw the motion if people are uncomfortable with the idea of requesting an alteration of this year's report and would substitute a motion that would put in place an action item for the chair to meet with appropriate parties with the intent of improving future reports.
I would second that.
Well, I've withdrawn the motion, and so that's no longer on the floor, I believe, Mr. Chair.
Nope, motion's withdrawn, second's withdrawn. So we're back to square one, and Jerry has a comment.
Yeah, and my comment is this one. I probably would have voted against the motion for a couple of reasons. Identifying the one that doesn't look right in the report this year doesn't help us guiding all the future reports. So a motion that talks about that the expenditures are reported back, identifying how they were accurately used and what impact they made, would be a great motion to come from here, from this group, for next year's report and every report that follows after that. And I think that would take care of it. I understand Jake's issue with what happened here, but guidance as to what the report should have in it and what the report will look like and how it will be used by people, I think is important.
Thank you. Rick?
Thank you. Wait a minute. I guess I'm unmuted. But first of all, I want to say, as having been the parliamentarian at the Academic Senate at Sonoma State, the Roberts rule says that once a motion is made and seconded, it belongs to the body, and it's not up to the maker to withdraw it. I don't know whether we want to stick to that rule or not, but I just thought I'd mention that. But one other thing I wanted to say, that Drew put in the chat an updated wording, word out of place in it, in the word accurately, but it adds, it makes reports plural, which I think addresses the issue that some of you are concerned with. It's talking about reports. That's not just this one, but future ones as well. So if it said the CAC requests that the Measure M reports accurately reflect, take the S off, LSR expenditures, I think that would capture what we are concerned about. It doesn't say we're going to hold this report up. It says we're concerned in general about these reports.
Thank you. Mosa?
You know, I don't feel comfortable, you know, with the motion just to leave it, you know, for the future. I think the report, you know, in my personal opinion, you know, should have a statement, you know, because this is an issue that we are discussing now, and we should, you know, contain it in the report, and probably, you know, add a statement, you know, in the future reports, you know, like each jurisdiction needs, you know, to reflect, you know, that information in their, you know, forms, including the county, and you know, a statement that, you know, like a group or a subcommittee of the Citizen Advisory Committee, you know, like is scheduled to meet with the county to address this issue, you know.
Thank you. Steve?
Well, I'm a little concerned that we're having this discussion at this meeting instead of in November when we first saw this. I think we're pretty clear that we want to have some of us sit down with the staff and with the county to make sure that they understand what we want for next year. And that also maybe in our letters, when we're asking for information from the various jurisdictions, we make clear that we want to express the impact that this funding has had, not simply the amount that was spent.
Thank you. Rick?
Well, there's been a favorable reaction to the suggestion that you and Shauna meet in person with the county. I think it's important, if you're going to do that, that you have something from the committee behind you to express our concerns. So I would be in favor of approving this motion with the change that I suggested a moment ago about the word accurately.
Well, Mr. Chair, if you accept Professor Ludman as the parliamentarian of this group, then the action that I suggested of withdrawing the motion was out of order, and we can go back to the status quo ante, which would be a motion as written down on the chat room. Is that correct?
Rick is above my pay grade as a parliamentarian, so I will accept that. And so the motion still stands out there. And I'm going to suggest, Jake, that you read what I just wrote. And I don't know, we could just keep going through this, but I verbally, I think what we're asking for, what this committee wants, is that they request that the Measure M annual report accurately reflect LSR expenditures of Measure M monies by all jurisdictions in a standard manner. Is that not what we want as a committee? This isn't just the county, because if we just single out the county, then some other jurisdiction may get into hot water next year.
To be fair, Mr. Chair, the monies, as I mentioned, are spent on a number of different things, and we want the money was always intended to have flexibility. So asking for standardized reporting is somewhat problematic, because they will all report out. What we're asking for truly is just more detail. So I think
that's right.
The item that we're looking for right now is whether or not this body recommends approval of the existing report to the board for approval, and then subsequently requesting additional information via a meeting with county staff to better reflect what the Citizens Advisory Committee is looking for in the future.
Okay, so if the
I would
motion-
support that motion.
If the motion said the CAC, I'm not even going to try and do it verbally. Shauna, can you offer an amendment to Jake's motion that puts into language on the chat room side what you just said? Because it sounded like I saw some nods there.
Well, I think the issue is whether or not we had a motion that was to approve or to recommend approval of the report. I thought that that happened first, and then we started talking because there was additional.
That is exactly what happened as I remember.
We voted. We had a first, a second, and a vote. The report has been approved, in my opinion.
Yes, thank you. That was my understanding as well. So right now, I think the thing that is on the motion that is on the floor is what Mr. McKenzie put before you. And I think that from the discussion that I have heard, the majority of the body no longer supports that motion. And yet, because we can't withdraw it, I would say that it should go up before a vote. And then the actual intent is for this body to simply request a meeting with, not necessarily by motion, to request a meeting with city or with county staff and SCTA staff to request additional information in the future and what it is that you're looking for.
That summarizes what I think I've heard from this. So I would say at this point, no offense to anybody, I would like to call for the question unless somebody has a burning desire to comment on the original motion. I think it's going to go down and I shouldn't say, but
in fact, I'd like, you know, like, I think we should not vote on the motion now, you know, like we can, if I may suggest, we can amend the motion if Jake's, you know, is okay with that, you know, to change the motion, you know, like to authorize the chair and two other committee members, you know, to meet with the county to get more details about their LSR, you know, program. You know.
Respectfully, I appreciate your comments. I don't think we need a motion for that. I think we just need this committee to kind of go, yes, we like that. Shauna, arrange it, please.
We're happy to take direction.
Yeah.
But
I'd like to get the motion off the table, even if we need a different motion. Also, I'd rather not amend Jake's motion. I'd rather come up with a whole new one if you guys feel a motion is needed. But at this point, I think we've got a motion that doesn't have a whole lot of traction. Jake, would you nod in agreement?
Already tried to withdraw it, and Mr. Lutman says that we can't do that. So I think the action before the committee is to vote on the
Call for the question. All those in favor of the motion that's on the floor that says the CAC requests that the Measure M report accurately reflect the expenditure of Measure M monies by the County of Sonoma.
So you're not using in future reports language?
Sorry, say that again.
I was back on the chat using the language that had been typed out that ended with the phrase in future reports.
Okay, let's go with that one. The motion, did you amend your original motion to that? And I seconded that?
Well, I was persuaded by the fact that it was mentioned that someone had typed the language up in the chat room. So I had assumed that that's what people were reading.
I may have made that mistake and thought I heard that was agreed to. So that could be on me, but.
Jake, are you okay with amending your motion to the last one on the chat room?
Yes.
I amend the second. Call for the question. All those in favor of that motion signify by aye.
Aye.
All those opposed signify by nay. Nay.
Nay.
Motion fails.
As they would say in Parliament, the nays have it.
The nays have it. Shauna, would you like to simplify this? We've already voted to accept the Measure M annual report. And what we want to do is we want to set up a meeting with Janice and her staff and one other volunteer from this board to ask for further details in their reporting. I don't think we need a
You
motion
said
for
you
that.
wrote something down, but you didn't put it in the chat, and it sounded to me like it was more to the mark.
I was, okay. Hang on a second. I'll get back, Jerry, I'll get back to that in a second. Shauna, do we need a motion for that, for you to just set up a meeting? Okay.
I'll be happy to take direction. That's
So
not a
the problem with that, Jerry, if I just put it up there like that, as Shauna had amplified, was that if I ask for a standardized way of reporting, that's problematic. And so I didn't post it.
Oh, okay.
I didn't want to create more problems.
I'd like to propose a motion because I think it is good, to have the support of the citizen advisory group,
right?
And to express, the long discussion we have about this issue, and the motion, to authorize the chair and another committee member along with Shauna to meet with the county to get more details about their LSR reporting.
Did you have one in mind, or did you want us to come up with something?
I already stated the motion. If there is a second, we can vote it.
I'll second.
Okay, any further discussion? The only thing I would ask is a reading of the motion again, so we know what we're voting on.
To authorize the committee, the Citizen Advisory Committee Chair, with another member of the committee and Shauna, to meet with the county to get more details about their LSR reporting.
Beautiful. I don't need any more discussion. Does anybody else? All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? If we still have a voting quorum, it looks like that passed. I don't know if we had anybody drop off or not. That would add even more confusion to this. But I do believe, thank you, Mosa, for that. And
Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to volunteer to be part of the meeting.
I am fine with that. Can we get a show of hands that everybody is okay with Jake sitting on that? Thank you. Drew, do we still have a quorum? Was that a good vote we just took, or Ross?
We do.
Thank you.
Here, so we're good.
Okay, guys, thank you. Sorry about, hey, we've all got, there's concerns, and this is the beauty of this committee. We get to have a discussion on it. So sorry about any confusion on my part in leading the discussion. Where are we? We're off to financial statements and Measure M expenditure plan amendments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just quickly to go over the financial statements. So what you have in your packet is not only the balances of each Measure M fund that we hold in the county's enterprise financial system, but also two spreadsheets showing the Measure M cash flow to date through December 31st, 2022, since the inception of Measure M, and then also the cash flow of Measure M for this fiscal year date from July 1st, 2022 to December 31st. I'm happy to answer any questions you have, but in the interest of time, I'd like to defer any questions to Mr. James Cameron when he returns from his leave, hopefully on Wednesday.
I think that would be appropriate. Jake, is that an old hand up?
Oh, sorry.
No worries.
It's done.
Okay. Ross, was this an action item that we have to vote on to table?
It's just an information item, Mr. Chair.
Just information, okay. Let's table that until James gets back and thank you. And we are on to the Measure M expenditure plan amendments.
You, Mr. Chair, I'm going to share my screen again. And start the slideshow. Drew, am I still on the right page?
Looks good, Stana.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, so the action item before you is to consider recommending approval of proposed amendments to the Measure M expenditure plan. SCTA staff has identified a number of issues that are being proposed for adjustment in the Measure M expenditure plan. These amendments or adjustments have been discussed with the project sponsors, and the technical advisory committee has recommended approval. The changes include modifications to the project description of 2 projects in the local streets projects program, funding adjustments to several LSP projects, and the creation of a reserve in the LSP program to be used by the remaining projects until the program, or in the program until that reserve is exhausted. Measure M was passed, as I mentioned previously, Measure M was passed by the voters in 2004 per the Public Utilities Code. It is allowed to be amended once annually, and both the expenditure plan and the Public Utilities Code identify criteria under which the program can be amended. First proposed amendment is to adjust the title and the description of the project known as the Forestville Bypass to just Forestville. The change would also remove Caltrans as the implementing agency, and the project description would be adjusted to read, the project would relieve congestion through downtown Forestville and improve safety, essentially removing any reference to the bypass. The expenditure plan identified approximately $2 million for the Forestville project, and no changes to the project funding are proposed. The county and the residents of Forestville no longer support a bypass. The proposed change will allow for improvements to be made in the town of Forestville in the spirit of the project as passed by the voters by removing elements that are no longer viable. The second proposed adjustment is to the LSP Hearn Avenue Interchange project. 2019, the SCTA board approved a resolution committing Measure M funding would be available to the project if additional grant funding were awarded. In 2021, the board approved programming an additional $10 million to the Hearn project. Then in June of last year, the board approved the Measure M strategic implementation plan, which sets forth the SCTA's program and project implementation policies regarding the use of funds provided under Measure M. The strategic implementation plan included $13.4 million. That's what was remaining of the original funding plus the $10 million. Funds require a 1-to-1 match. In working with the city staff in the last 6 months, we have determined that an additional $2 million is necessary in order to ensure delivery of the project identified in the measure. The proposed adjustment would change the original expenditure plan estimate of Measure M funding from $9 million to $21 million. It is a total change of $12 million. The third proposed adjustment is to the LSP Highway 116-121 intersection and Arnold Drive improvements project. The intersection improvements phase of this project, also known as phase 3, has experienced increasing costs due to project delays, mostly related to the time between when the project was selected to receive funding in the State Highway Operation Protection Program in 2019 and when the funds were actually programmed, which is in 22-23. Because of delays and design cost increase, SCTA have estimated that an additional $2 million is necessary to ensure delivery of the project identified in the measure. The proposed adjustment would change the original expenditure plan estimate of Measure M funding from $7 million to $9 million and would replace the word signal with the word roundabout in the project description. The fourth and final proposed amendment would create a reserve in the LSP program by reducing the amount estimated to projects that have not progressed as originally anticipated for various reasons, and pooling all of those funds by any projects remaining in the program. No, and it would pool all the funds and make it available to the remaining projects in the program. Existing programming would remain unchanged for all projects. Only as yet unprogrammed funds are proposed to contribute to this reserve. SCTA met with both the city and county staff of the affected projects, and staff support this proposed amendment. This table is from the staff report in your agenda packet, and it shows the funding adjustment proposed. The figures in red have been reduced from the original estimate. The figures in green have been increased from the original estimates, and the figures in black remain the same. So you can see here, Pengrove, I think, had $19 million originally. It will be limited to $5.45 million instead. Airport Boulevard had $15 million, and $15 million has been programmed. No change to the airport project. Oh, sorry. Let me go. Here we go. As I mentioned, the 116-121 project would go from 7 million to 9 million. Hearn would go from to 21 million, and Farmers Lane would be reduced to just the 437 that is currently programmed, that and so on and so forth. The total of amount in the reserve, that's this last line, is $20.913 million that would be put into a reserve that would be available to all of the projects in the program. So should Farmers Lane decide to come forward and actually move, that money could get programmed to that project. But it would be based on who's ready to go and how it would be based on project readiness and a number of other factors. So the above proposed amendments of the Measure M expenditure plan are allowed by the expenditure plan and under the Public Utilities Code, section 180207. Amendments to the plan can be made annually, and any further amendments to the expenditure plan would not be allowable for 1 year. Staff has reviewed the expenditure plan and has not identified any other changes that should be considered at this time. That was a lot to so I'm going to hand that back to the chair.
There's a lot of there. Is Measure M allocations picking up most of the increased cost that we are seeing the need for?
That is what is being proposed, is that there's a couple of increases for there's the increase for the 116-121, and Measure M would help, but each one of those projects requires a 1-to-1 match, so it still has to be matched with other funding. So Measure M isn't shouldering the entire burden. If there are cost increases to the project, it must be met with both Measure M and something else.
Thank you, Shauna. Rick?
Yeah, thank you. Shauna, this rule about not amending it more than once a year, do I understand correctly that moving money from the reserve to a project that needs the money would not fall under that constraint?
Correct, because that would be a programming action rather than an amendment to the expenditure plan. That reserve would be available to any project in the LSP program.
Great, thank you very much.
Great question, Rick. Thank you for the answer, Shauna. Denny?
I'd like to make a motion to accept the Measure M expenditure plan as amended.
I'll second.
Brian's got the second. Any discussion? Tom?
Thank you. Yeah, I have several concerns, and I appreciate, Shauna, you putting this together for us. We're going back to the old ballot measure language to drive this decision making. And one of the things that's enshrined in there is this concept of congestion relief. That's the measure was labeled that. And one of the problems we're finding is that we can't get grant money for congestion relief anymore as easily as we perhaps could have when the measure was first passed. So on the Forestville project, for example, I have no objections to pursuing what the community wants to do up there. But I did buzz around in Google Maps to see that this morning. And, you know, congestion relief does not appear to me to be the big concern up there. It is road safety that is the big concern. So I was hoping that if we are going to go to the trouble of changing the measure descriptions, that we should be closer to some of our newer objectives that are the ones that are in alignment with state transportation priorities. And so that in the case of the Forestville one, relieve congestion, improve safety might be something I would ask to consider for that, as well as for the prioritization in the reallocation of the surplus or of the unallocated amounts, item 4. Again, I don't like the prioritization of just congestion relief, but maybe my hands are tied. Maybe our hands are tied because of the ballot language. I would hope we could have a conversation about that today. Was that clear?
Yes.
I think so. So the proposal for Forestville, let me address that first. The proposal for Forestville is the project would relieve congestion through downtown Forestville and improve safety. Are you suggesting that we move relieve congestion and improve safety in the town of Forestville? I think what we were trying to do was just stay as close to the original language as possible.
Yeah,
Does
we
that
just
still-
struck the language that no longer applied and left the reduce congestion, improve safety language.
I'm sorry, you're right. That is in there. Forgive me for forgetting about that. I'm content with the language as it appears.
Great. So then going back to the reserve, I do believe that we are bound by what was passed by the voters. So we are allowed to amend, but we cannot change what was approved by the voters. So I think we're trying to stay as close to the original intent as possible.
So
Are your concerns assuaged, Tom?
So on page 50 of the 86-page agenda packet, item 12 is the reserve project description, the new project description. And one of the things I noticed is that this is abstracted largely from the existing measure language. Existing projects from the LSP program category that need additional funding will be the first priority. Changes in scope will be the second priority. New projects will not be considered unless and until existing projects are completed or withdrawn by sponsors. Projects must maintain a 50% match. It appears that there's a two-tier set of criteria for the reallocations, that the first will be on project readiness and availability of matching funds. That deprioritizes, and it may even be understood to not have SCTA have discretion about that. Is that the intent? Because I think the original ballot language showed that SCTA has discretion over all reallocation decisions.
David, you look like you want to.
Yeah, the intent is to have staff have discretion on whatever projects come forward, but at this point, there are no projects that are in the works that we are aware of that would be coming forward for this funding in the near term. So I think the idea is for the existing Measure M LSP projects, should City of Santa Rosa or the county move forward on them, whoever comes in first will evaluate the projects, and if we recommend moving forward on that project, we'll bring it back to this committee and the board to make a determination. But we definitely have discretion to say, no, we don't think that's good use of the funds.
Okay, that's reassuring. I appreciate that, David. Yeah, again, this language lacks any reference to vehicle miles traveled or greenhouse gas reduction or safety, which are high priorities for both our funding partners as well as for the, in our new programs going forward, our new strategic plan. So I guess I hear you, Shauna. Our hands are really tied about how to spend the Measure M money. If no projects do come forward under LSP and the measure terminates without projects, have we answered that question about what would happen to that $20 million?
This money will be there until it's spent down on the projects that are in the program. So it goes first to the remaining projects in the LSP program until such time as the project sponsor or SCTA determines that they will not move forward and they are withdrawn. Then we can't even consider new projects. So it has to go to the projects that are in the program first. And I don't expect that $20 million to be hanging out for very long. Honestly, I think that other projects are going to move forward that are within this program category that are going to be able to spend that money.
So and in the interim, if those projects aren't moving forward, as noted in the staff report, the funds are available for in-program loans to the other Measure M programs or intra-fund loans to Go Sonoma projects. So we could use that to advance Go Sonoma projects in the interim. But as Shauna mentioned, the funds will ultimately have to return back to the LSP program and be spent on LSP projects.
Right. So do we have some sense of the ranking of those existing projects, where they might stand against this new set of reallocation criteria?
Well,
not at this time.
Do we anticipate something like that being developed in the near term?
At this point, it really depends on whether these projects move forward in the next 2, 5, 10 years. I mean, if there are projects that come up, then we'll have to develop some kind of criteria. If there's only one, then we'll have to evaluate it still some kind of criteria.
Okay. Well, thank you. I appreciate you letting me ask those questions. Yeah, this $20 million is going to continue to be governed by that 50% match, which has been the big limitation, the big constraint, which has basically kept a lot of those projects from moving forward. So I think I understand that. Appreciate you letting me having so much back and forth just now. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tom. Denny, I hope you're not going to withdraw your motion.
No, my point is, Mr. Chair, due to time, can we move on, or else you're going to be losing me and you're not going to have your, I got, my life is growing old here, buddy. So I got to move on. So can we maybe take to a vote to this motion? And then I got to say farewell to this fine group.
So, Mr. Chair, you have a motion and a second on the floor.
Call for the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Oppose? Abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you. All right. Final programming. Or do we want to table this till February? In the interest of time. Do we need
This has
action
to
on this
go.
one?
Yeah, I need action on this one too. I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. This one is familiar to everyone, so I should be able to go through this relatively quickly. I can reduce some of this so that we can move this along. Your screen again real quick. Okay, so the SCTA final funding program, you all saw this in September or August, I think, and this was something that the board voted for a draft version of in September. So just as a reminder, we did a call for projects. We asked for the top 5 priorities. Each jurisdiction submitted their list of projects. We then evaluated everything, and we also took into account, I'm going to skip these, there were some other funding programs that came before we had time to program the SCTA. You'll remember we programmed STIP early, we programmed the Safe and Seamless Mobility Quick Strike program early. We then were able to also apply for TIRCIP funding, but what we came back with was a level of detail that we could use to evaluate the remaining projects in the program. And we evaluated them all based on criteria that were established in the goals of Plan Bay Area, the Comprehensive Transportation Plan, the Sonoma Climate Mobilization Strategy, and Go Sonoma. And the criteria evaluated, equity priority communities, potential mode shift, safety, community engagement, emission reduction, and project readiness, among others. We started with overall ranking. We did raw scores and then eliminated everything below 95, and still we had more money asked for than we had available. So we had to use some additional criteria in order to make that decision. As I mentioned, we took that recommendation to the board in September, and the board approved the approach of submitting a list of projects. And the list of projects is shown here. It was the projects that are shown in green are what we submitted for the One Bay Area Grant Cycle 3. In January, MTC released their list of the selected projects. MTC projects they approved in excess of our target amount, which was great, but we still didn't get all the projects that we asked for because we submitted 120% of our target. So there were 2 projects that did not get selected. Those 2 projects are shown in pink on this table, and staff is recommending that we use Go Sonoma funds to program these 2 projects to fully fund the SCTA program as it had been recommended in September. As a reminder, this slide shows the funding percentages per project type, with bike ped making up 45%, traffic operations 35%, pavement 16%, transit operations at 4%, but that didn't include TIRCIP. Once you add TIRCIP, the overall percentages change to 28% transit capital, 38% bike ped, 12% pavement, 20% traffic operations, and 2% transit operations. So staff is seeking a recommendation for approval to the board of the final staff recommendation. Staff has adjusted the final SCTA funding program list to adjust for the project selection by MTC as shown in the previous slide. I could go through, but I don't think you guys need to know about the public engagement that we did. We did a robust amount of public engagement. We did a survey. We got responses. This is the schedule. So we are right in the end game right now. We've received MTC's recommendations. So we are just ready to finalize the SCTA funding program that will be going to the board in February. And so this is coming to you now. There was one last thing, which was MTC had reached out last year seeking input on how delivery issues should affect the points awarded. This is what they came up with. What it comes down to is there was only one jurisdiction that was affected, and they're not proposed to receive OBAG 3 funding, so it doesn't affect us we're good. With that, I would turn it back over to the chair. We are looking for a recommendation of approval of the final SCTA funding program.
Tom, short, please.
Yes, thank you. Shauna, why do you think OBAG 3 didn't fund the Lynch Creek Trail? Is it because it's not in a injury network area?
That could be part of it. It could be that, I mean, they didn't tell us. We haven't debriefed with them yet, but we did submit 120% of our target, so they had to cut it somewhere.
Okay.
It's not in an equity priority community, so that probably contributed as well.
Okay, and the other project is a pavement rehabilitation project. It seems like a fairly expensive one relative to the others on the list. Is there a reason why we're comfortable backfilling out of our Measure M funds?
Well, it's Go Sonoma funds, and the intent is to fully fund the program as was recommended in September. And the board approved the recommendation in September as a draft. So we're just proposing that we saved money out for this very reason of Go Sonoma. We had the capacity for it. That's what we intended to use it for. We saved that capacity so that in case anything didn't get selected, we would be able to fund it with Go Sonoma.
Great, thank you for reminding me of all that. I would then move to approve this as drafted by staff.
Second.
Any further comment? All those in favor signify by aye or a thumbs up. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Any abstentions? Rick, abstention? Got that, Drew? Okay. Motion carries. Thank you. You all get a Purple Heart for lasting this long. We have just a couple administrative items. Drew or Ross, who's handling the last bit here?
Yeah, this will be easy. So I included the February 6th SCTA RCPA Board of Directors agenda with this agenda packet. If you have any questions, please let us know. Yeah, Monday the 6th at 2:30.
Thank you. Any announcements, other announcements?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Jake.
One of past people's notice that the infamous, what's his name, Howard Jarvis attempt to do away with the Regional Measure 3 toll funds was unsuccessful after they fought it all the way to the California Supreme Court. And so we can anticipate MTC wrestling with the question of how to extract all of that $500 million from escrow and distribute it to the projects for which we all voted back in June of 2018. I'm very happy to make this announcement and hope that we would have a briefing on this topic at some future meeting.
If we have time, I would love to have one in either February or March. Shauna, Drew, our agendas are usually quite full, but perhaps we could have a 10 or 15 minute brush up on this. I know there are some T's that need to be crossed and I's need to be dotted from the Supreme Court deal. I spoke with David Rabbit just before this meeting. He was not terribly concerned with those, although it's not a done deal quite yet. So
I have
with
no
that being
doubt that
said,
our illustrative chair or our illustrative executive director will be happy to have a discussion about this after we get a little bit closer to resolution.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
thank you, guys. Sorry about the length. We're out. See you next month.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Have fun. Bye.